And if you're ready with the mission statement, go ahead, Irene.
Sure. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. However, these Zoom meetings are helpful to parents all around the world, and they are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members who are not able to attend this meeting live can also watch. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Jake. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you, Jacob, for being here. I'm going to read his very short bio. It won't take very long, and then we'll be able to have him speak about his amazing book. Jacob Cooper is a clinical social worker, certified Reiki Master, and certified hypnotherapist who specializes in past life regression therapy and works privately with clients through online services. Inspired by his near-death experience and transformative encounters, he facilitates spiritual awareness and empowerment through life-changing seminars. Currently, he resides and practices in Long Island, New York. He is the author of Life After Breath: How a Brush with Fatality Gave Me a Glimpse of Immortality, which was published by Waterside Productions. I have lots of links for him, information that I'll be putting in the chat box and on our YouTube video. But for now, please join me in welcoming Jacob Cooper. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you so much for having me. Is everyone able to hear me? You could raise your hands. Yeah. A true honor to be a part of an honor presentation for Helping Parents Heal. I've been following your works for many years, and it is an honor to be here with you here tonight. First and foremost, I think it's great to start off, the new year, with this kind of discussion. I think so many people are really looking towards different transformative experiences to really allow, their path to be filled with wisdom, understanding and mindfulness. And I think it's an honored position to be in. But yes, I published and wrote, Life After Breath around a year ago this time. And it came from a very unlikely source. And why I say that is I was, as a kid, I was never a good writer or student. I was in remedial courses for writing at community college. And I firmly believe if I could write a book, almost anyone can. It's just a matter of dedication, discipline. But a lot of the motivation behind the book was just a homage to, so many books that I've read in my lifetime that have transformed me and have allowed me to give me empowerment within my own near-death experience, particularly one book by the name of Embraced by the Light by an author by the name of Betty Adie, which I read in my 20s, which for the first time gave me the vocabulary and the meaning of near-death experience. And this was something that I had within myself, but I didn't have the lexicon. And I know my friend who's on the book, Dr. Ray Mahmoodi, I owe a great debt of gratitude for coining that term, in the mid-70s. But so much of the book was to give back to, those who I've been close to, who have impacted me. And so I think if you read this book, my goal is for the book and the experience to not be mine, but for it to be yours. As I always say, we all have a story in us, we just want to find each and every day to tell our story and to share our story. And part of my story was that it was very hidden. It was one of these books on the library shelf for almost 2 decades where I kept it there. But it wasn't until I actually opened up the book and the story where I gave it meaning, and that took the dust off the book. And so my near-death experience in my book is only as good as the ability to articulate it, to give it to others. And I recognize that the experience that I have is not made for me, but it is about the ripple effect. And I hope that tonight's talk in somehow, some way is able to touch a part of you that's familiar, as I don't believe in anything that I'm about to discuss here tonight is not something that in some way that it isn't known. Otherwise, the majority of you wouldn't come to this type of work. I think it really brings up a lot of amnesia for a lot of people that we have um, this deep interconnection to something more than just our body and our experiences here. And we are so much more than what we think. So I want to give over some highlights of my own near-death experience. And what I'll say as a premise is that my near-death experience is probably a little bit more different than the average near-death experiences that you see or watch in the media, like from Anita Morjani or Eben Alexander. And why I say that is, their experiences probably happened when they were in the middle of their life, and they were working, and then they had this experience. Almost kind of like the movie Hook with Robin Williams, and that's a great reference where, Robin's living his life in that movie, but then he has this experience, and he goes to Neverland, and then he comes back, and he has to live his life, with that experience. And he was just in this rat race kind of lifestyle, and that's what happens to a lot of people, where they're just, chasing, the monetary stuff and playing the game, and then eventually there's this rug that's being pulled, and they're forever transformed. And I view the near death experience, out of body experience, or the loss, a transformation, transition of souls, as inseparable. To me, they're different categorically, but they have the same potential to transform. And hopefully my talk will allow us to transform. And I view transformation as trans, meaning to change and form our own shape. And so hopefully this experience will allow each and every one of you to come out with something from it. But my experience occurred at the age of 3 years old. And I know Elizabeth was telling me that this was at a similar age to Ingrid. If you've read Ingrid's book, I think who wrote a book, so guided by, a brightly guided life or something like that. But I know Ingrid's a friend of mine. So, but it's different. And with that, there's a lot of controversy. And why I say controversy is, a lot of people will say, oh, you were such a young age. Where is this coming from? How is this possible? And, what I'll say is this experience really highlights the premise that we are not our bodies. We are eternal ages. We have consciousness that's not produced by our ages or personalities, but rather filtered through it. And my near-death experience highlights that. But a bigger impetus behind writing Life After Breath, which I'll get into, was that I suffocated as a result of whooping cough. And for years, I've been wanting to write a book, but it was never the right time. And actually, I live in New York. And when I was presenting my first ever workshop, someone came up to me and she said, when is your book out? And this is my first ever presentation in my mid-20s. And that's kind of how New Yorkers go, want it right here, right now. And it just wasn't the right time. And I was given my first public presentation. But for me, I think the last year or two that we've been living in was a big impetus behind getting it out, because I saw so much symmetry in my own near-death experience, and what I would call the global near-death experience, and what people went through, or in a sense that it wasn't all that different. I think in a way, just this rug of life that we were living on was just yanked from us in the last year or two. And as a saving grace for many people, we had to really go onto another channel of life and really tune into a different frequency. And so when I had my own near-death experience as a result of suffocation due to whooping cough, which I'll talk about briefly, it wasn't the breath of the body that saved me, but rather the breath of eternity that my soul was inseparable from. And that allowed me to overcome any bit of suffocation. And so if there's anything else from this talk, is really to understand that when we're going through a difficult time, we are birthed from the breath of eternity. And From the Jewish background, our soul or spirit is known as ruach, which really means the wind of God, translated. And so we are spirit, we are the wind of God. And so on a literal or metaphorical basis, when that wind is pulled from us, it's possible that we could find what I call the eye of the hurricane, or that beauty within the storm. And we're able to go that as not only a place to survive, but a place to thrive in. And I know so many of you probably here today have experienced that to a lesser degree. And if you haven't, I promise you that is a possibility, and it is a possible reality. Um, so my experience occurred at September of 1993 at the age of just 3 years old. It was right before the Jewish high holiday of Yom Kippur, which is in the Jewish tradition a day of atonement, a day in which the soul is getting itself ready to meet the Creator for a year of manifestation, a year of setting the year off right, in a way to meet the Creator. And so I was about to meet the Creator, but little did I know it was a different sort of Creator. It wasn't the Creator within my own tradition or in a synagogue. It was a literal, direct, encounter with the Creator. I was going to a playground at the time, with family, friends, and my babysitter and a sibling of mine, as well as their children. And in my book, I talk a little bit more in detail about my NDE. I don't want to, but for time's sake, it might be a little bit difficult to get into every detail, nor do I want to bore you with it, although I could be a bit of a Virgo too with some of my details, so forgive me. But, I was going up a ladder onto a slide, and as I was climbing up the ladder onto the slide, my breathing became a lot more belabored. And eventually at the top of the slide, at top of the ladder, I began to just completely suffocate, which I don't know if any of you have ever suffocated, but that was the most difficult experience that I probably had. It was also a double-edged sword as to why I think I'm able to remember it from the intensification of trauma that experienced some suffocation. But due to the whipping cough and the pertussis that I had and this cough that I had, all parts of my breathing just stopped. And I was kind of what Eben Alexander talks about in Proof of Heaven. I was just in this weird incubational place of this period of just, I wasn't, in my body, and I wasn't crossed over. It just felt like a place of, a little bit of difficulty and a very low point from not having my breath. And so as I was suffocating, I just recognized that there was no point in being in my body, that my body was no longer functioning properly. As if you were to be in your own vehicle and your car isn't working, you would go outside of your car and you would pop the hood and check out the mechanic of your car. And so that's what I did with my body. I got out of my body, and without needing to read a manual, there was a higher awareness that I was experiencing, not only of my soul and other beings I was about to, greet, but also in terms of higher intelligence. In that moment, from the being in the disembodied state, I was able to have an awareness of a lot of different, components of my bio-neural, chemical state that I don't think I probably would have had I went to Harvard Medical School, bear in mind at the age of 3 years old. And then moments later, as a result of the suffocation, much like a power breaker in a home, I just saw all parts of my body just began to shut down, one unit, one part at a time, as a result of this intensified suffocation. And the last part that I remember being able to experience and recognize was my own brain. And, looking at my own brain, I was able to have a heightened awareness in my brain and the different components of it. And just fascinating how I forgot about all the biological functional components, and it was so readily, easily able to be remembered. And then moments later, I felt my brain, slowly start to begin to just kind of, like, it was like a large crack that I felt within my brain, as if the euphemism, my brain literally cracked in half. And that's when God and spirit came in on a literal basis. And as a result of this, it felt like a large thunder crack within my brain, where my brain was just literally snapped in half. And I felt as if a plug was just yanked out of a wall and my brain was just totally just cracked. Once that happened, I had a lot of the classical references of near-death experiences that I know Dr. Moody highlights, such as the tunnel-like sensation and experiences of vibrational frequencies. Um, then I was on like a ride that almost felt like I was at an amusement park or a theme park where I was just going upwards and upwards on this endless journey of euphoria, outside of my body, outside this realm, to where there was no possible end or climactical end. And that's a very foreign feeling to to our body, because we're used to almost having a cap. Like if we go to a restaurant, and have a certain meal or be with someone, no matter what, there almost feels like there's like a cap on how good we could feel, but there's no end in sight to how the rug of life, so to speak. So, when I was on the other side, there was no possible end to how euphoric I was feeling, which is a very foreign feeling in this life. We're used to needing a reason to feel, climactical or euphoric, and there was no reason but, the divinity itself. And, within moments later, I began to recognize a golden palace right to the right side of my head, which was now at the top of the slide. And in this palace that I was looking at, I could hear intensified, vibration and sounds, and I was aware of, you know, endless, angels around this being, I'm sorry, this palace. And for me, looking at this palace was almost just a representation of the highest octave possible in life, which the best way I could describe is, you want to call it the universe or God, whatever have you. But to me, it was just this endless climactical, reference of create all creative energy and source of, life and all that ever is and ever was and all that emanates from it, with an endless apex of euphoria. And looking at that, it was almost too profound for myself to look at, and I just almost had to shield myself because such a transition that I was experiencing, and it was still an incubational period when I was crossing over to the other side. And then there was a part of myself that was going back and forth where I was having this heightened soul awareness far beyond my ethereal body. And I was still tuned into the life that I was living in a way where I was beyond my ethereal awareness, but I was still aware of that life that I was living. And then there was a part of me that was worried about, the life that I wanted to live or finishing that out, or my parents. And then in that moment, I was greeted by what I would best describe as a Christ consciousness. And I know many near death experiencers experience Jesus himself. But for me, this was even deeper. This was more than a representation of a physical structure or physical Christ in front of me. This was a heightened consciousness or vibration that I was experiencing that was incredibly familiar. And being on the other side, it was almost this familiar octave that my soul knew was just kind of like this octave on the other side that my soul knew was was a intensified vibration on the other side. And being this spirit, I was able to go into this endless timelessness where there was no past, there was no present, there was no future, it was no time. It was just this endless experience and feeling. The best way I could describe it of all is well, will be well, and was well. And that's not something that we're ever used to in this lifetime. We're used to anticipatory anxiety of what's to come or rumination about what has happened. We're not used to being in the state of intense knowing that we are fine. We are more than okay. We're okay, will be okay, and have been okay from the larger soul's vantage point. And in this point, I was able to really heal a lot of the trauma, anxiety, and attachment that I had, as well as a cognition that the parents that I had biologically were my biological parents. It was all a part of the playing, but I came through them and not from them. And for many, that's difficult to hear. And it was a different vantage point that I had as a young 3-year-old, where I just put them at this pedestal. But then I recognized that there was a deep soul connection that I had, but I wasn't created from them. I was through them, but not from them, if that makes sense. I belonged to a much greater intelligence. And then moments later, my body just began to go down the slide, and I was able to see to the right side and to the left side of me my two spiritual guides, which for me, this wasn't something telepathic. This was something almost physical. It was right to the sides of me, and I was looking at my own spiritual guides. And my common theme of my own near-death experience is an intensified embarrassment, an embarrassment that I forgot that all of this beauty was always around me, always inside of me. And it was something that I forgot, and I was just kind of blinded, by this human experience, even at such a young age, that I forgot on some level all that was inside of me and around me within my everyday step and everyday journey. And in looking at my spirit guides, it was the most beautiful homecoming that I had, and this endless climactical exhalation that I was able to see. And in the moment, I knew their names, and their beauty was beyond comprehended words. And they were just so magnificent. And I knew there was a transparency with my soul in what they were able to see, as if they were able to know every part of me. And there was no capacity to be a politician like we are in life. I couldn't fake anything. I couldn't be deceitful. Whatever I thought telepathically was there. There was no, filter. It was all very raw, and very transparent. And in that moment, my body went down the slide, due to the force that my own spirit guides had. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But then slowly I noticed that all the individuals that I went to the park and the playground that day were surrounding my irresponsive body, and they were calling my name. And I saw that my body was, on the ground, but I was able to feel a form to the side of my body. And I was trying to literally shake the people around me when they were trying to call me, but I was able to see them, but in my own way, they were able to not see me. And this might sound harsh, but I can only speak from my own organic experience. I can only tell it like it is. And I feel you don't deserve anything less than 100% transparency. It was as if that suffocation in its own way continued, where I felt suffocated my body, and I almost felt suffocated as if like I could see them, but they couldn't see me. And they were looking at my body, which I knew was a filter of me, but wasn't the full totality of myself. But in that moment, when they were surrounding me, I was able to be privy to a lot more awareness and intelligence that I ever had of all those beings. And there was a man there who ended up saving my life, who was like a CPA type. And I was looking at his energy field, and I was able to see, his own guides and hear his own electromagnetic auric field. And it just amazes me looking back that we sometimes put in a possessiveness of those who are spiritual, but then we will identify those who aren't. And in that moment, I saw that spirit is the oxygen of every soul. It is the breath behind each and every one of us. Some have more recollection or embodiment of that energy. But when you squeeze out the orange and you get the orange juice, and you squeeze out our being, you just get spirit. And that's all that's left. And in looking at every part, in every being that was, with me, that's all that I saw was pure, high vibratory spirit. And some, and, you know, and I talk about in Life After Breath a little bit of this, but then in moments I was able to feel, my own form of my soul, of my own field. And then moments later, I looked right into the distance, and right overlaying this reality, I was able to see a field of endless angels that were literally floating right in front of me. And these were angels that were kind of like a bronze, kind of goldish color. And this was right in front of me. And I almost had to pinch myself because, yes, they were quite familiar, but also it was such a transition from even at 3 years old to see these in front of me, where I just had to pinch myself. Am I making this up? Is this real? Because they were literally right in front of me. And it was literally right above this reality, right here, right now. And so what I learned from that is heaven is not a place that you could put on your Waze app or GPS and say, this is heaven. Heaven is not only a place that we're connected to, but it's inside each and every one of us, and it is all around us. And, it's not a place, it could be a place that could feel far away, but it's also right here, right now in this reality. And seeing all these angels, I was able to feel their healing energy, and they were very youthful in their presentation. And whereas the spirit guides had a lot more individualistic presentation, a lot more earthbound characteristics, these angels were almost kind of like minions of the angelic field. They were very uniformal in their presentation, and they weren't necessarily concerned with me. They were more focused, on the macro energy. So I was able to kind of see them, but they were just kind of looking out straight ahead in the distance, where the angels, the spirit guides, were more concerned with myself, but I could see their energy that they were sending, the beauty that they were sending, their healing energy that I was sending. And I just saw in that moment how this lifetime was so much more connected to a beautiful energy and a symphony that was not far away, but right here, right now. And moments later, I was able to encounter my own spirit family from the other side, and it was just a beautiful reunion. And then moments later, I was posed a question, what I would be doing in this light realm on the other side. And then, I kind of said, well, if I do stay in this life and continue this life, because I had curiosity as to what would this life be? What would I look like? What was this journey going to turn into? And so I was giving autonomy, which is one of two positions of near-death experiencers, where either you're told that you have to stay or you're giving, an autonomous decision. And then moments later, I was encountered by a lot of different children that I had known were not my own children from this lifetime, but children that I taught in my own last lifetime, which has been evidentially read by different intuitives far beyond me going public. And years later, I had experiences of this lifetime that would come through in the same exact, representation. But this was a lifetime in which I committed suicide. I had hit rock bottom. I was kind of cornered in this lifetime, and I saw no hope, no avail. And I just saw that this was kind of it. And I took my own life. And then moments later, from that, life of suicide, I was just, remembered that I crossed over. There was no judgment. There was pure love. There was pure understanding. But, I saw from that lifetime that I put a lot more entrustment in my own paralysis of my fears over the beautiful eternity of the love inside of me and love around me. And I really saw a lot of symmetry behind the charted near death experience that I had at the age of 3 and the life in which I took my own, I committed suicide. And I was able to really span the globe of a lot of different carnations, which I speak about in my book, Life After Breath. But I did see that the life that I would be living karmically as well as dharmically was very closely related to this life in which I took my own life. And I saw how there was so much symmetry in charting my near-death experience in speaking to the life that I committed suicide. And then moments later, I was able to see a lot of different people that I would be working with and speaking in front of. And as beautiful as the other side was, and as much as I wanted to stay, I said that is always there. This window of integrating this experience to, really move the needle in many lifetimes is not forever. This is a unique opportunity. And within that moment of choice, there was no turning back. I made this decision that I said, I will commit a lifetime to this work and this beautiful message and this path. And moments later, all of the beings, slowly kind of dissipated from my immediate awareness. But I was left with a bit of fear, trepidation, where I just said, how do I know that I will be able to reach, all these people and help out all these people and live out this life? How do I know that this will happen? Where's the guarantee? And the message of that I had was the power of belief, of how belief is a massive governing force in every walk of our life, from health to life path to life purpose. Belief is the ultimate governing force within our life, and how the power of thoughts and belief was really the roadmap influencing our life as our greatest superpower. In that moment, everything didn't leave me, but it left my immediate awareness, because I was really a part of being human. Otherwise, if it wasn't a degree of separation, we would just be over there, not here. But in a moment, I woke up on a hospital bed with my mother, who was with me, and I saw, a great deal of distress, as well as, heightened agitation, where I had this experience, but I was only at the age of 3, and I didn't have the vernacular to express what I was having or experienced. And that feeling of almost suffocation lasted for almost 2 decades. And it was something that I just kept very close to me. And it wasn't a time, I only became public with it when, my body or the guitar was able to match the guitar player, and I was able to really play the song and ground the experience. But it was almost took me around 2 decades to really integrate it. And again, I'm a Taurus, and Taurus are known for their possessiveness or just taking ownership of things. And so this kind of afterlife experience almost made me possessive of this experience where I just thought I was the only person that had this in a way. But reading Betty's book was incredibly cathartic and healing and had universality behind it, but it was also quite deflating where I was just like, geez, all right, I'm not that special. Other people have this. But in a way, I saw how healing it was, the power of, you know, and I know HPH does this, where the power of having support, in your path and other people to really rally behind because I think many heads are always better than one head, and we're having experience. It's as only as good as our ability to integrate it. It's not made for us. It's made for really to have a ripple effect in our ability to integrate with this an experience. And if we do believe in a sense that we are all one, that does mean that we are our brothers and sisters keeper. And having my experience within the playground taught me that we are just our brothers and sisters keepers here, playing, learning, evolving in God's playground. And, I just think that, many people who hear my near death experience feel like I took this out of a Spielberg film or, a Quentin Tarantino film, but this is literally, what happened. And, so much of the experience isn't the experience of itself, but the ability to make sense of it. And each and every day is another opportunity to learn from, grow from, and evolve from. And the easy part is just railing off what happened to me. Where I have to roll up my sleeves is learning each and every day to integrate it into everyday life. And that's the real work that I have. And each and every day that canvas changes and the artwork of it changes. And it's not that the experience changes itself, the experience was the experience, but I look at each and every day as a different opportunity, to integrate it differently. And I'm a big Wayne Dyer guy for those who know me, and Wayne is one of my guides. And I could get into that in a little different way, but I love the quote by Wayne where he says, "The moment you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And so with my NDE, as I'm evolving, the river's always changing, we're changing. And that's the beautiful part that really separates spirituality and religion. It's this open-endedness where it's continually unfolding, and there's always different ways to reframe it and to look at it in a heightened new way as we're evolving our ability to articulate, understand, comprehend. And that to me keeps life very much exciting, this continual open-endedness of experience versus a close-ended experience where there's no prosperity of coming through a stagnant, kind of cap of it. And how could you make a finite perception off of an infinite encounter? And so that's my everyday experience. And so with that, I don't want to bore you for talking too long. I know I'm from New York, or we could talk a mile a minute, so I apologize. When I go to Tucson and visit my cousins, they'll just say, you got to slow down. You got to, so if I talk too fast, I'm sorry. It's just from New York. That's how we are here. So if any of you have questions, I
Yes.
don't know how it works.
I
Feel
have a
free to
question,
ask.
and I just love listening to what you're talking about. I first of all think it's really interesting, and I think that you're going to integrate this into another book, that this whole experience happened on Jacob's ladder, because you were actually climbing Jacob's ladder when this happened, and that's beautiful. We have some questions in the chat box about your life review. I know you were only 3 at the time. So is there anything to review at the age of 3? Is there anything that you were going through and regretting and maybe looking at the ripple effect of, or did that not happen at all?
Yes. And what's interesting is my life review wasn't just restrictive to this life, as I feel, as a past life regressionist, I say past life, but to me, there is no one individual life. It's all, interconnected. And so this life review wasn't of just this lifetime, but of other different carnations. Um, but there was more so an understanding of what I felt like to my parents, and just this endless love that we shared and this bond that we had, but also a deeper vantage point where I was able, in a way, to take that pedestal for my parents as this all omnipotent, all knowing being and just kind of almost humanize them, which is very deflating for a young kid because that's very different than how we grow up. But at the end of the day, we had this infinite high supreme being, that's filtered through this limited age, and we're not our chronological age. And, there's a forgetfulness about this. And, I think in a way, children could almost be older spiritually or holding on to that old part of them because they're a lot closer to the other side, and parents are more mature earth-wise, but kids are a lot more, in a way, older, more mature with their own spirit. And so, for me, that was very hard because there was this outer reality of this world that I had to integrate in, but the majority of life that I was connected to was this inner reality. And so what was hard was the people looking at me when I was lifeless in my NDE and looking at my body didn't stop from my NDE. That kind of continued throughout all my life where people were just looking at this body. And this body is holy, it's sacred. I honor it, but it's not who I am. It's just a filter of my own consciousness. This body, this name, this identity is just a filter of this life, but beyond that is a timeless, endless soul. And so, yes, I am working on my second book. I almost am completed. So you must be highly intuitive. And my next book is called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And I know mothers could attest to this, that there is a lot in a name. And I always kind of question why the name Jacob in a way from Genesis. But yes, those familiar with it, he ran away from his brother Esau and he went to what is now the city of Bethel or Bethel, which translates to the house of God. And he had his dream on a rock and he saw the angels going up and down the ladder. And so the work of my next book is I look at life after breath as my karma or the story that I had, and the wisdom of Jacob's ladder as the dharma, the meaning behind it. And I think that in a nutshell is in our life. As Deepak Chopra would say, we're here to transform our karma into our dharma. And I think that's the beauty behind any transformative experience. If you just ruminate about what happened to us, it's hard to move the needle. Now, if we focus on what we were able to do with that, how we were able to transform from it, that is the beauty behind the experience in the other side, of it. And so I think that's the beauty behind the many paths of the mountain of transformational experiences.
So, with all of these transformational experiences and all of the healing modalities that you've studied, have you been able to recreate in your own uh, for yourself this incredible, wonderful feeling that you got when you were over on the other side? Were you able? Can you now, or is it hard to live in this life? I guess that's what I was getting at. I know that a lot of near-death experiencers find that there's no color in this world. There's no music, there's no dimension. And I can't imagine having this happen from the age of 3 and living this way. Can you recreate that through other ways that you are connecting to the other side?
Absolutely. I think perception is our biggest reality. And from having the near death experience, I was able to have a recollection of the mind as well as the eyes of God. And, so much of this life is remembering who you are so that we can remember who we are. And who you are is so much more than you could possibly imagine. And I view this life as not only a school, with tests, but also a school to really learn what it's like to be a guide. And we're able to do it here. There's a transition to when we cross over so that we could be a guide through others. And there's different themes and there's different stuff, but it's through the experiential reality that we're able to really have an integration of what we know. I don't necessarily believe that we're here to learn anything because I think the soul has an all knowingness to it, but rather an integration of that knowingness within this experience. And that allows, continual evolution, expansiveness. But I think everything is how you frame it. There are some days where, yes, I do get a homesickness. I do want to be there, especially the last 2 years. But I think so much of this is really entrusting that higher intelligence and that everything has a purpose, including our own struggle, including our own pain. And I think in a way, it's um, my own segment of the Torah portion that I read for my own bar mitzvah was called Kedoshim, which translates to mean holy. And it's in the first lines of that Torah Genesis portion, Bible version is, you should be holy because I am God, am holy. And I really view that so much of life is taking what we see as mundane experiences and being able to see the sacred in it. And I think there's a reservation for God for a checklist, but God is not in, the things that don't, gravitate to us. And I think it's really the closest thing to God is to learn this unconditional love and to look up at people and up at situations versus down. And we could really think and see the world through that lens. We don't have to wait to get to heaven to that. We could see it in each and every moment. And so it's in the small things, it's in the mindfulness, it's in the integration of that. And it's such a sacred experience to be talking where 2 or 3 days ago, I know the great, spiritual leader and an agent of transformation and peace, Thich Nhat Hanh from Plum Village, crossed over. And I think so much of what I think about him is the ability to integrate peace, mindfulness, and a holiness in our path. And he had a documentary called Walk With Me. And I think we have to be able to walk with each other and walk with God and walk with that so that we don't have to wait till we die to get to the other side. We could embody that within our body. We can embody heaven within our body. And that's what I am able to do.
Beautiful. That's very true. We have a lot of other questions. I think one is fascinating from Peter saying, is there a meditation that can induce something like an NDE? That would be nice if it's not having to
Right.
actually experience it. Do you know anything
Right.
about that?
Yeah, what's interesting is when I give talks, a lot of people will say, Jacob, how do I have a near-death experience? And I have to be honest, it's not something that you really want. I don't wish that on someone, because why I say that is, a lot of people will focus on the positive, euphoric elements, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. But on the inverse of that, it's been very difficult. There was a lot of trauma that I had to have from many levels. It made for quite a complex childhood. It wasn't easy. And so I think if that's in your chart and something that is a part of your soul's journey, then that's right for you. But on average, it's not something you want, nor is it something that you need. What I experienced within my NDE was that nothing changed in a sense that within just my own awareness. And when I meditate, it's almost as if I'm having intimacy with the infinite or the eternity. I'm able to get to a part past my own thoughts, past my own ego, past my own identity. And I'm able to go within this timeless place where I just know factually my body can go, my brain can go, but I know this is who I am. And I'm able to get to the stillness of the water, not so much the surface. And I think meditation allows people to get to that. And that was a quote that I first had within Life After Breath by Thich Nhat Hanh, where the stillness of the mind and the clear, the clear of the mind, the stillness of the heart, the infinite will present itself. And so what I believe is a lot of people try to go from 100 to 0 within meditation, or they have a very unidimensional viewpoint towards meditation. But I view life as our meditation, the practice of it in everyday life as it. And that would be called mindfulness. What I would say, though, is everything was rooted within a foundation. If you're being mindful, but you're full of vengeance, hatred, anger, anxiety, that's not proper mindfulness. I think the best mindfulness is rooted in compassion, empathy, wisdom, ability to separate ourselves from the stimuli in our response and develop that freedom of space, which, a lot of people are able to transform horrific outer situations to an inner new experience. But yes, finding some space, getting quiet, but I think it's through the body that we're able to really open up the doorways of our own mind, not the other way around. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. And you know what, Thich Nhat Hanh is definitely going to be someone who's incredibly missed in the physical right now.
Mm,
He was the one that probably introduced meditation on the largest scale of anyone from the Eastern religions, and I feel so grateful to him myself. So I'm just mentioning that because it was so
yeah.
recent that he transitioned, and
And
he's
he had a great quote about a cloud, where a cloud, when it becomes rain, it doesn't change, it just changes form. And when we cross over, we don't change, we just change shape, we change forms. So yeah.
exactly. I have some other questions too from people, and I don't want to take up all your time with my questions. When you do past life regressions for patients, are your patients able to connect to their loved ones? Is that something that you do with your past life regressions?
Yes. When I do my past life regressions, I try to give back what I was given my NDE, where I recognize that you don't have to wait till you die to have this. You have your own brain, which isn't the creator, I believe, of your own memories, but just the filter of it. And from, really my brain snapping in half and losing, the functionality of my brain, I was able to recognize how the brain is not the creator of our life, but the filter of it. And so through past life regression, which is a form of hypnosis, you're able to go into those deeper brainwave states where you're really able to access your higher subconscious, where memories beyond this body are all possible. And so connectivity to loved ones, and kind of like what Michael Newton talks about within his work in the Journey of Souls, the Destiny of Souls. Highly recommend all of Michael's work. So I do as well the life between lives within my past life regression, as well as in utero. But I find that to be a very soul enriching and enhancing experience, where you're able to connect to not only your loved ones, but also your spirit guides and all beings on the other side as a part of your journey within between lives, as well as past lives. So that is a very common part of my regressions. It's very comprehensive. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I have another question. Joe is curious as to how your experience affected your religious beliefs. Has it changed them completely? Do you still celebrate things, obviously, in the Jewish faith? Have you kind of switched to a more, I guess, afterlife
Right.
ideology?
Yeah, I grew up in a very, like an Orthodox home. So we were very strict with, all the rules and rituals. And I went to, Hebrew day school. And, you know, I think, a lot of people are very easy to knock that part. And who am I to do that? I would just say within a level of development, there's different languages that people are able to understand and to be receptive to. But I think, religion is more of an outer experience, where spirituality is more personal, it's more inner. And so I always love to live from the inside out versus the outside in, if that makes sense. And, Mark Anthony, who's a good friend of mine, I just spoke with, Rocky, his assistant, a couple minutes ago, has a great quote where he says that spirituality in the afterlife exists. Not, I don't know if it's his quote, but he always does it. That's a great quote. Exists not because of religion, but despite of it. And I think that that's true. Where I think religion takes a monopolization of God, or just kind of like, this is what God is, and spirituality has an open-endedness, where it's a continual unfolding of seeing God in all things, but it's a lot more personal, and just catered to your own souls and its level of understanding. Where religion is more of a basic collective framework that, wasn't as personal, didn't speak to my own, individual connectivity. But I think spirituality is a lot more empowered. For instance, from day one, physically, we're dependent on parents. And I think within the origin of belief, we're also wired that way, where someone greater than us or someone bigger than us has an ownership of God or belief. And what I learned from my NDE is that's not something outside of you. You don't have to have VIP to access God, or God is not a career counselor. God does not care your position, in a church or synagogue, or in a mosque. God doesn't care what you're doing. I think God cares about how you're being while you're doing. And, God loves you for not what you do, but for who you truly are, deep down at the core of you. And I had an intuitive friend of mine who said, "Do you believe in the universe or God?" And I said, "Yes." And the person said, "Well, how could you possibly doubt yourself? Because to doubt you would be to doubt the universe or God." And that was just so profound, where sometimes we see ourselves as separate or less than, or but we forget who we truly are, and that the magnificence and the infinite beauty that's inside of us and forever around us. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, there's another question. Melissa is asking, could you please explain your spirit family on the other side? Could you talk about that?
Yeah. I had an aunt of mine, and I give this example, life after breath, to just kind of illustrate a lot of what I'm talking about. But in my later teens, early 20s, I was blessed to have a lot of like pockets of people that grew up the same way that I did, but they were interested in this stuff, including a cousin of mine who's in Arizona who also had a near-death experience as an infant herself too. Her name is Jane, wonderful mentor of mine. But that's a part of the charting phase of life, where here and there we have angels and guides within our family, that we're you know a team. But when my aunt was crossing over, transitioning, she was having something called deathbed visions. And when she was having this, her last words to me was, "Have you ever looked at a portrait of a family?" And I said, "Yes, but why you bring this up? Like, you've had so much better stuff to bring up, and you're talking about pictures. Like, what are you doing? Like, what kind of medication are they putting you on with whatever?" And so, and then she was saying, "Well, if you look at the picture, everyone else looks the same, looks maybe different." I said, "Yeah, I'm the best looking one there, right?" But no, she said, but she said they have different characteristics. But if you look at the eyes, there's something very deep in the eyes that's very uh, powerful, and it goes beyond this lifetime, and it's profound." And I thought, okay, that's a cool message, whatever. And then 2 years later, I was having a reading, and someone was having interdimensional communication with my aunt. And she kept on saying, "Why is she talking about pictures? What is this emphasis on picture, picture? What does that mean?" And I knew that was her message. And that message to me is, we might, be different or connect differently to our biological family or family within this lifetime. But beyond that is a connection that goes far beyond this body. And it's really, what I would say is, kind of like an octave of the divine, or just kind of like an expression of the divine, or a ray of God that's within the soul family that we have, where it's kind of like a similar kind of energy that we have as a team, of souls. And so I think a lot of people will have a set definition or characteristic, and I'm not one to have that, but I would say it goes beyond the root of biology. The fact that there are billions of people on the planet, and for us to connect right here, we all are a part of a soul family. How you want to word that, how you want to divide that is different. There might be different, nuclear, energies behind that, but I think it's it goes far beyond this lifetime. The connection is profound, but it's a part of a team-based effort, that we're all a part of, if that makes sense. And it's a play of this lifetime, of many lifetimes.
Perfect sense. Um, so Christine is asking a question, and this might be, we might have time for one more after this, but I would like to know your opinion about dreams and what they are and if they are significant. Could you
Yes.
address dreams maybe?
Yes, I have a chapter dedicated. This might be a sensitive topic, but to suicide. Just a couple of months ago, I lost my best friend to it for over 20 years. And, I was putting off my book for a couple of months, and I was doing an event with a medium friend of mine. And she didn't know really that I was working on my second book, but she was connecting to my friend of mine. And he said, "Finish the book, go for it. There's more to it. And, like, part of our relationship is to be there." And I thought, that's cool. But that gave me the confidence to continue the wisdom of Jacob's ladder. But a couple of nights ago, and I posted this on social media, I had a dream. And that dream was, I was going to his home that I spent so many days, nights, it just felt like a lifetime in. And the home was completely barren and empty. And I was just so depressed. And then I was looking for him all over the house and he wasn't there. And I was just very distraught. And then I opened up the screen door and I saw him with the football in his own backyard. And he was smiling and he looked as vibrant as I knew him. And from that moment, I said, wow, he's not in he's not in his body, he's in his backyard. And the body is not who he is. He's come home. He's returned to his backyard, which was the exact words that I uttered at his eulogy when I gave to him, where I said, in his eulogy, I said, I would love for one day to pull up a chair to you and hang out in your own backyard. And I think the message was I didn't have to wait to that I could do with that within the dream state. So the dream is really, dreams are really languages of the subconscious. Sometimes they're easily translatable and sometimes they're a little bit more complex. So if you are interested, you can consult with really entrusted dream interpreters, but they do speak to our subconscious mind on a deeper language. But it is possible to have our loved ones really connect and communicate to us on a deep level. And within Life After Breath, there were nights where I was seeing myself typing on my computer and my grandfather was right next to me and he was dictating for me what to write, and it felt realer and more real than this. And so from my near-death experience, I could tell you that the other side is not a dream. It's almost as if this is the dream in a way. That's more real than real, over there.
We are fortunate to have Teresa Chung, who's going to be speaking to us. I believe it's on the 2nd of February, and she wrote the A to Z Dream Dictionary. She wrote an encyclopedia on dreams. She's over in the UK, and she's written probably 15 different books on dream interpretation. So if anyone on here is interested in learning more about dreams, then please attend that meeting. That is maybe not the 2nd, but it's definitely coming up right in February. I was going to just maybe ask one more question because we have 2 minutes. How do you feel about astral travel and projection? This is Judy asking this.
I don't have an opinion about almost anything. I have a knowing. I don't, I don't believe. And I think what's important is to govern our lives, from that regard, based off of our own truth, our own experiences, not in the hands of others, but in our own direct experiences. But these are all things that we go through on a regular basis, and through strengthening, our own spirituality and the subconscious mind, we're really able to really empower ourselves to know that we are just so much more than our body and our consciousness, and we have those exact capabilities within each and every one of us. And so my NDE, I just knew that my brain didn't create me, my body didn't create me. This life I wasn't belonging to. I was just connected to so much more. And so I think a part of us exists beyond this body, and we exist also other there. I mean, the number one question that I had almost was if, when we reincarnate, how do people communicate with us on the other side? And I think through a lot of Michael Newton's work, if you read his books, and I could agree with this, that there's a part of us over there, and then there's a part of us, over here. We're not limited in any fashion, shape, or form. We're connected so much more beyond this body. And I think that's mind-boggling for the left brain to understand. But what's limited to the finite understanding and context of the mind is unlimited to the unlimited infinite soul. And so I think so much of our understanding comes through the vantage point of how we're able to perceive it from in the limited or unlimited context.
Well, we are here and there at the same time. That's
Yeah.
something that I truly believe. And I believe that actually our kids are even greeted by us when they get over there, because we're over there, we're here. Our souls can be in many, many places at the same time. But I think that it's not necessarily something that everybody has to believe in, but I do believe that we have so much more capability than we actually realize when we first start working with all of this. I wanted to let you know that everybody know that Irene has kindly said that Teresa Chung will be speaking Tuesday, February 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. She's speaking earlier than normal because of the fact that she is in the UK. I would also really love for you to maybe give us some parting words of wisdom before we close. I've been fascinated by everything that you've said tonight, and I would love to hear maybe some advice for parents who are on here who are having a hard time imagining their children over on the other side and maybe what they're doing and if they're happy, and if could you just say a little bit, speak to that for us?
Right. I think it's very important to honor both parts of ourselves. We have a human part and we have a spiritual part, and that's all a part of our experience. And, Ram Dass would say we could go up until the ethers of the stars, but we still have life here in our own challenges. But we have the ability to fill that with wisdom, with grace, with understanding, with support. And so I think what we're doing is great, because as a psychotherapist, I could attest that, when we're going through something, isolation is the biggest hurdle to come through in difficulty. And we're having collective support, that could lead to a lot more transformation. And I think the more that we're able to see ourselves differently, we're able to view the nature of reality difference. And I think in a way, if we see ourselves from a bodily position, that's what we'll see. But we see ourselves as a soul. Eventually, we'll be able to understand love as the DNA of that soul. And we'll be able to look at love from a deeper angle as what connects us to all things that we can never, ever lose. Even if it seems like it just merely changes form and changes shape, as well as the infinite love inside of you and around you is infinitely far greater than anything in front of you. And I know that sounds difficult or harsh, but it's truth from what I've experienced. And the more that you're able to recognize through different experiences what's inside of you, around you, you'll be able to remember who you are, what you're forever connected to. And this is the mind of heaven. It is the eyes of God. And it is their ability to not have to wait till get to that point to be enlightened, to see the truth, but rather we have the ability to embody that in this moment, in this life. And that's something to not wait for. And that's a beautiful thing. And so we all have that ability for recollection and integration within our everyday life. And this is not just creating heaven on earth, but remembering that we are all a part of heaven here on this earth.
Well, we have so many people saying beautiful things about you. Jamie says, how fascinating. I could listen to you for hours to you. Thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge. Susan's saying, thank you so much. Rita's saying, so healing. Anna is saying, yes, me too. I could listen to him for hours. Camille is saying, amazing event tonight. Jacob's book is fascinating. Claire O'Brien is saying, thank you. And Annabelle Maria is saying, the mind of heaven. Wow. And I just, Judy saying, amazing. Thank you so much. I just want you to know that this is exactly what we love hearing about. And I know that you do classes, that you also do past life regressions. You do a lot of different healing modalities that are of interest to our parents. So hopefully we'll be able to maybe put some of that information on the YouTube video if you'd like to. But I think that the most important thing is for people to be checking out your website and seeing the upcoming events. Is that correct?
Yes. And, all my services allow people to remember the direction of life that they're facing. And we have to turn inward to really see the beauty at times, especially with what's happening on the outside. And that allows people to really change their vantage point of life, to not be a leaf in water, but rather to generate their own currents within their lives. And the current is not just yours, but all around you. And that's a beautiful thing when you're connected, to the soul and to the energy around it.
Beautiful.
This was, yes, it was beautiful. And we always ask everyone to unmute themselves and say thank you and good evening to Jake, if possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have you come back
you.
again,
Thank you,
please?
Jay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you, everybody.
You were wonderful.
Yeah.
You were
Enjoyed it
wonderful.
so much. Good.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a
I'm just a
wonderful-
mirror for all of you all.
Thank
What
you.
you see in me
Good
is
night,
what's in
everybody.
you.
Amazing.
Thank you.